What if I told you that spending money to buy points could actually save you thousands on luxury travel? I know, it sounds backwards, but today's guest is here to flip the script on one of the most misunderstood strategies in the points and miles world. Tommy Lonergan, aka Travel Like Tommy, is a full time nomad who lives in hotels over 300 nights a year and flies business class for less than the price of economy. And one of his biggest secrets? It's buying points, but not just anytime or from anywhere. In this episode, Tommy breaks down when buying points actually makes sense, how to spot the best deals, and why this move can preserve your transferable points for even bigger wins down the line. And if you live outside the US and feel limited in the points and miles space, well, this episode is packed with insight on how buying points can unlock world class travel even without US credit cards. If you're looking to stretch your points further and unlock luxury for less, this is the episode to play on repeat. Welcome to the Revolutionizing Your Journey podcast. My name is DeAndre Coke. Before we introduce today's guest, just want to send a reminder out that you can watch all of our episodes in their full entirety on YouTube. And for those watching on YouTube, you can actually catch the full audio version on every single podcast platform that we have that essentially exists out there, but also not on YouTube. Every Friday, we have our quick hits, which are our up-to-date weekly travel points and miles news and alerts. Now, on to today's guest, which I am super excited for. I've been trying to get this guy scheduled for probably 6 months now, but there's a reason why we haven't been able to, and it's because this guy travels like no other. And I know we've had a lot of exciting guests on the show, but when I say truly like no other, I mean like no other. His name is Tommy Lonergan. His handle is Travel Like Tommy, and the guy is gone out of the country or traveling more times than he's home, and that is not an exaggeration. And I am super excited because Tommy and I, we got to meet at Travel More, and friendship started from there. So Tommy, welcome to the show.
Awesome, DeAndre. Great to be here, man. And took a couple of rescheduling and some last minute changes, but we're here now, man, and pumped to be here.
Absolutely. So Tommy, I've heard you talk about buying points and how that can be an unsung strategy in the overall points and miles world. And quite honestly, it kind of blew me away because I was in the ballpark. Even someone with an advanced understanding of points and miles, I was someone that always dismissed, why would I ever bother buying points? I've got Amex, I've got Chase, I've got transferable points. I have all these different things. I have businesses, I have spend. I don't really have a need to buy points. And then I heard you explain and talk through where buying points can fit in. And that completely changed my vantage point and my whole strategy around points accumulation after that. So I'm super excited to have you here today as we do a deep dive on why and when does buying points make sense. But before we get to all of that, I need you to tell in more eloquently a way than I can about yourself. Where do you technically live, and how'd you get into the points and miles world?
Yeah, for sure. Well, technically, you could say I'm homeless. I like to call it I'm home free. So I've been full on nomad for about 4.5 years now. So I literally live in hotels full time. I happen to actually be home right now in Chicago, taking a little travel time out, which was much needed. But yeah, guys, I'm just like DeAndre said, I'm out of the country 200 plus days a year. I do 300 nights a year in a hotel. Long story short, I built my life around points and miles and being able to travel and kind of live this lifestyle. So I literally eat, sleep, and drink this stuff.
So you said you kind of are full-time travel. You're taking a little bit of a pause now and back home in Chicago. Like, how many days or months out of the year are you typically traveling?
Yeah, it's kind of a nonstop. It's basically I've got travel where my presence is requested somewhere, whether that's speaking at an event or I've got something going on. So, that's kind of like that need travel, which you want me to be somewhere, I'm going to be there. And then when there's not, stuff on the schedule or the calendar, it's kind of like, okay, well, where do I want to go? What do I want to do? So, I spent a month in Bora Bora in January. I was all over the States, in Asia, back and forth, February and March. It's in Bali all of April. So it really just kind of depends on what, kind of more so now when my presence is required. But otherwise, guys, like I don't have a home base. So it's kind of like I'm not doing this whole I'm traveling. Oh, now I'm back home and now I'm traveling. It's kind of just in a constant state of, hey, I'm just on the go.
And so all of that travel has allowed you to experience all of the best of the hotel world, the airlines. I know that you've got pretty much top status, I'm assuming, at every single major hotel chain with a lot of the airlines. But a lot of what you do and talk about and preach and work with your clients, which we'll get to at the end, is about points and traveling with points. So my question to you, which I think will help create some background, is how did you get into the points and miles world originally?
Yeah, great. I think everyone's gonna have a very similar, story. How did it kind of start? And at the end of the day, we got into it because guys, we wanted to travel, right? And once we start traveling, one of the first things we realize is A, how much we love it, but B, holy crap, even budget travel, it can be expensive. How do we travel more or better without the costs or a fraction of the cost? And that was really, my story was I've known about the points and miles for years. My dad was a 3 million miler with American. And I had minimal exposure to it. But then basically right after college, got my job, paid off, my car and my student loans. And suddenly I had some money to start traveling. Went to a trip down to Nicaragua with a bunch of buddies. Just like I was saying, I got home and it was like, oh my God, when can I go? What's my next trip? But then I saw how much money I spent on this quote unquote budget trip. And I lived out in Vail, Colorado. I was an executive chef. So I was living my dream lifestyle, but I needed more money. How do I travel more without impacting my work life quality balance? Because it was good. There's got to be a way. And so I really, at that point, 22 years old, that's when I went down the rabbit hole. And not just, guys, we're talking about travel. We don't get to the travel piece until you get your credit right. And so I learned everything about credit cards, points, miles, the first class, the status. So it's basically just years of educate, execute, educate, execute. And suddenly it went from being able to travel more. You might see me in first class now, but trust me, I did hundreds of thousands of miles in the back of the bus in the middle seat because that stuff wasn't important then. And then, yeah, it kind of shifted to, we got business class, first class. Everything just kind of started leveling up more towards that travel better scenario. And yeah, guys, like I said, 15 years, I just went down the rabbit hole. It's kind of crazy to think I turned this into a full-time, business and make a living off of doing the things I love to do.
And I love how you talked about the progression and not just going from economy to business class to first class, but also just understanding credit, right? Understanding financial responsibility. And I always have to tell every single episode, and I'm sure the longtime listeners get tired of hearing this, but we always have new listeners every single episode. Being a financial advisor, I have to promote financial and fiscal responsibility. And although this can look very glamorous, we're talking about things that when done improperly can really mess up your finances when it comes to using credit irresponsibly and such, right? So understanding credit, understanding your finances, understanding not paying interest on debt, but utilizing the benefits you can get is huge. And it's fantastic that you started with that foundation to help you at least start traveling. And then once you got used to kind of that world, you leveled up to the business and the first class and what we see nowadays and the conference speaker that you are and such. I've seen you now speak at multiple conferences when it comes to travel for different subjects. So I want to get into the meat and potatoes, Tommy, of our conversation, and that is the concept around buying points. And I know most people, when they hear that, they would say, why do I want to worry about buying points? Especially if I'm here in the States, I've got all of these transferable currencies that DeAndre has been talking about for the last couple of years. I've got the Chase and the Amex. I even got Citi now. I've got points coming out of the woodwork. Why would I ever buy points? So I'm going to ask you, Tommy, we're going to cover this from both a beginner level and an advanced level. And let's just start with saying, while I know it can seem like a strange idea to someone, whether they're new or experienced, can you walk us through why someone might want to buy points on purpose?
Sure. And I'll just kind of rehash back in terms of like, that foundational stuff being the credit. And, everything I do with this, I've got a strong foundation and I'm playing this a long game, not chasing sign up bonuses. I'm setting myself up, not for this trip, but for the next trip and the next trip and the next trip. Because if you play long and you think long, You're not just going to win the game once, you will continuously win the game. And that's kind of, this whole idea of buying points and miles. That's a key piece that's been part of my strategy since the early days when, like I said, I didn't have a ton of spend. I had a sub 6-figure salary. Trust me, my cards were dialed. I was fully maximized 3x, 4x, 5x, but I still wanted to travel more. And so essentially, with this idea of buying points, yes, I might have had Amex, I might have had Chase, all, you name it. But I was thinking several trips ahead. I said, okay, well, if I do this, then I've zeroed out, my Chase points. And then I'm not in a position to be in a position, as I like to say. And so suddenly, I started looking at things a little bit more strategically of, hey, if I do this, then what's the outcome? And one of my first kind of scenarios with points was kind of back with Hilton. And I was going to the Conrad in Koh Samui. I wanted to do, I think I had enough points for maybe one, or I think I did 2 nights. And then, I heard about the 5th night free, and I had Amex points to transfer over at, 1-to-2 ratio to do a 5-night stay, which still, even for Hilton, still would have been a great value. But then I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, I've already got my gold and my platinum. I'm not going to get any more sign-up bonuses for Amex. I'm going to be at 0 if I make this move. Well, I wanted to stay for 5 nights. So with Hilton, and we're going to touch on Hilton probably a few times on this one in terms of a kind of first place to start, but I don't remember what the out of pocket was at the end of the day, but it was fractional to where I spent $800, $1,000 to purchase the Hilton points to bridge that gap between being able to do 2 nights versus 5 nights. And I kept my couple 100,000 Amex points for a future trip, which was probably flights, who knows what it was, but it was a significant kind of opportunity cost decision there. And once I did that, that was like kind of the entrenching moment of, hey, this is a major part to your strategy. And to this day, I think about, hey, is there a scenario to buy points every time I'm looking to do something still? Do I do it every time? Definitely not. Is it part of things I consider? Yes.
So all of us that have any really status with any hotel chain, probably not even status, we have an email account or a registered account with them. We get the emails all the time, buy IHG, buy Hilton, whatever it may be. And like you said, you're not always buying them, but there are times that it makes sense. So what should someone know or be comfortable with before they even think about buying points?
I have a lot of just reoccurring themes that are kind of widespread because it's not about searching. It's about doing your research. We got to have a plan, right? So to go in blind, you get an email like, oh, there's an IHG sale. Okay. What can I use these for? When can I use them for? Is this sale ongoing? There's so many kind of decisions to think about when it comes down to this. But I would say number one is before you take action, and this is with anything in life, get plan together. Unless it's some 2-hour flash sale that, you don't have time to think. Well, we don't see those, but it's all about having a plan, because if we have a strategy behind what we're doing, it's pretty easy to come to a clear-cut decision as to, hey, does this make sense for me or does this not? Is this a short-term gain for a long-term negative or vice versa? But anytime we see these sales or, regardless, even just a regular redemption with points you have a plan, have a strategy. And again, think about the impacts 1 or 2 trips down the road.
So, Tommy, is this only something that someone more advanced in points and miles should consider? Or if you're a beginner, this is the first or second, podcast episode you've heard on the subject of points and miles. Is there something for the beginner as well to grab from here?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think, especially on the beginner side, I remember what it was like, when I got my first Capital One card, and, usually the beginners were in that points building phase. And it's generally, you might get some sign-up bonuses. Hopefully you're getting cards strategically for the long term, but we're having to build points. But there's also that itch of all right, I want to travel. I want to use my points. I want to, get to that end result fastest. Right. And so, and that's such a huge piece where this points buying kind of comes into play. Now, again, doesn't take away from the need of planning and doing some research and homework. But, for example, let's say you want to take a week-long trip and you want to fly business class for the first time and you want a nice hotel. Obviously, Hyatt's got great value, but you want to stay at a high-end Hyatt for 5 nights. You're still looking at 150, 250,000 Chase points, which is a lot. So if we want flights, for example, you can more or less, if you're savvy, let's just say 75,000 points gets you one-way business first class, more or less anywhere in the world. We'll just call that a generic thing. You're looking at a couple of cards with sign-up bonuses and, there's a lot. Well, how do you bridge the gap on the hotel side? And even for someone that's a beginner or an expert, flights are a lot harder than hotels. If we just think about the number of hotels, the number of rooms in every hotel, we just talk numbers, finding hotel availability is going to be easier. Your flights are hard. You have points for your flights. Well, crap, I need 300,000 more. It's going to take me 6 months to do that. Or, well, hey, I've got my points covered. I got some cash kind of budgeted for travel. I can spend $1,500 and buy points right now. And now I can go to the Maldives for 5 nights, fly on my points, $1,500 out of pocket. And it gets me to that end result, not only quicker, but it also keeps intact thinking that long-term plan. And maybe you don't even have to use all your points. But so yeah, beginners, like I told you guys, that was one of my first, maybe my second or third trip ever. The purchasing points came into play and looking at Hilton and just seeing, hey, where's the standard availability? It's fairly simple to find out relative to trying to do it with flights, which still a play there. But beginners, don't be scared. It's absolutely something to look into, but there's great resources out there now. There's YouTube, there's blogs, there's full-on how-to instructions. I give some value these days, but not, nowhere near out there. Just Google it. How to redeem Hilton points for max value and reverse engineer it. I want to go to the Maldives. What are my options? How many points does it need? When's their availability? So beginners, guys, don't be scared. Start with hotels, specifically Hilton.
So, Tommy, that was awesome. My question for you is, how do you decide whether buying points is a smart move for a specific trip? Because you just alluded to thinking ahead, and at this stage, sounds like you're planning more so for an advance or planning in advance. So when you're thinking through the points buying, are you looking more so at, I've got this specific trip in mind I need points for, or I'm buying points that I know I will use for some future unspecified trip?
Both. I want this message is, how do you take this idea and translate it to you individually and what your travel goals are and what your frequencies are? With me, I'm on the go full time. So yes, I'm obviously always thinking about, what's that aspirational, what's that big thing that I kind of want to do, but then also, hey, what's that kind of that need-based travel? And again, how can I incorporate this buying points scenario to keep all of my long-term or more aspirational things in play so that I can pull a trigger at any time. And then at the same time, it's like, oh, well, hey, got to go to London in July. Got points, but I might be able to buy miles right now. I might be able to buy Avios and book a business class flight for $800-900 as opposed to dumping 70, 80, 90K points. So it's something that I literally take into account, really at every which way, especially if there's a need base that comes up. God, there's nothing better than having a flight you need to book or a hotel you need to book, and there actually being a sale that's good and there's availability. Oh my God, that's the home run. Does it happen every time? Definitely not. But that's one of the best kind of just overall scenarios because then you're not sitting on points, you're not sitting on cash out of pocket. But rarely do those stars align, but that's a home run scenario. So, which I will take advantage of every time. If got a need, there's a sale, there's availability. Won't even second guess buying the points.
So that's a perfect segue because I wanted to ask you about the timing. And we're going to get to values as well because I want to be very specific for some of the listeners as well, especially the ones that have an advanced understanding of points and miles. But where are there certain times of year, specific promotions when buying points makes more sense? Because as you just said, there's like this home run time frame that has to line up that always does it. But you can pretty much buy points for every hotel or airline at any possible time. So I'm sure there's times when it actually makes sense to pull the trigger and times that it doesn't. So can you speak to a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think just a couple of general thoughts, guys. Usually, in Jender's right in the sense of miles are always more or less available. And more often than not, there is some kind of sale going on. They say sale, but it could be 30% discount. It could be 70% bonus. It could be 100. It's generally going to change throughout the year. Okay. What I would say is in general, between at least some of the main programs that I will, consistently buy through and probably across the board, there's usually going to be that one sale over the course of the year that is a cut above. Maybe we consistently see 70, 80%. Well, we get that once a year where it's that 100% bonus. It's that kind of high time of the year. I see those a lot, kind of like right around right now, like May, June. And then you see a lot of that like November, December. So like, for example, I talk about buying points with an immediate use. And this kind of thing goes into one of our other questions here is, speculatively buying points with not an immediate use, but I know I'm going to use them. So like, for example, back in January, Air Canada had, I believe it was 100% bonus. I forget what the exact cent per point cost was, but it was their best deal, let's just say, or their best sale that I had seen in a while, going back to last year and so far up to this year too. So I did speculatively buy points that didn't have an immediate use, but that price to acquire them was so low relative to, other times of the year where I did buy them to stack up the account. But usually, as I said, I think, 1 mile at a time in particular, that's one of the blogs I'm pretty heavily read on. You'll see, if you see a sale come up, guys, it's going to be like, oh, Avios has an all-time sale. A lot of these blogs, like 1 mile at a time or Wordball, they're going to show you like a history of those sales and say, hey, in March of 2024, it was this, in October, and it's going to kind of show you where this sale falls in line relative to the history. And when you see one that is bigger and badder than the rest, that deserves a further look into, if you will.
So what's a good target price, Tommy, to aim for when it comes to purchasing points? I know this is going to vary across the board, right? So it's going to be probably different for an IHG than it is for Hilton than it is for, I don't know, American Airlines. But do you have some metrics or numbers that people should be trying to go after, target a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I would say if we kind of just split the two, flights and hotels, generally 95% of the time, I'm not going to say every time, if I'm not able to acquire these points at 1.5 cents or less, or I should say less than 1.5 cents each, I'm generally going to pass. Unless, like I said, okay, maybe it's 1.6 cents and I got a flight that I can book right there. It's rare, but 1.5 cents, guys, that's a great number in the sense of, I talked about that 75,000 points. That gets you pretty covered. Guys, acquiring for 1.5 cents each, you're basically looking at, let's just call it $1,000 out of pocket to purchase the points, which essentially that's the price of an economy ticket when it's all said and done. $1,000 buy the points gets you business class, or $1,000 paying cash gets you economy. So that 1.5 cents, that makes that whole idea of, oh my God, I'm using points, but I'm paying cash. Oh, but that makes that a reasonable amount. We're like, okay, well, hey, it would have been $800, $900 fly economy. Well, let's just buy the points, So yeah, that's just kind of where it all falls into. 1.5 cents and below is 1,000% worth a look for flights. With hotels, we're seeing a lot of shift over to dynamic pricing and things like that. There's still kind of, these award charts, and this is flights and hotels, but I kind of take IHG and Hilton are kind of in their own little pocket. Marriott's kind of a standalone and Hyatt's kind of a standalone. So there's a little bit of nuances. Generally, with Hilton specifically, guys, it's almost year-round, ongoing. They call it 100% bonus, 50% discount, but you're basically at any time able to acquire points at half of a cent each. So 100,000 points, $500. So in terms of like, oh, there's a sale. I mean, for as far as I can remember, it's almost always ongoing. IHG will have a similar acquisition price, like I said, about a half a cent each. Their sales will actually fluctuate a little bit more, but in terms of that acquisition for those two, half a cent each, you really won't see less or more. Maybe once a year, there might be some little crazy nuance, but what's cool with the Hilton points in particular is, guys, there's always a sale. So you don't have to be like, oh my God, like there's a sale, I got to do it. It's kind of like Hilton's there, like when you're ready for it, like it's there. And then when it comes over to Marriott, especially with all their changes, Marriott's tough now, especially really to get some value out of those points. Now, I generate a boatload just because I live in a Marriott. So I'm able to organically generate Marriott points. But in terms of transferring points to Marriott, in terms of purchasing points, it's got to be less than a cent for sure per point for it to really make sense unless you're bridging the gap. And then Hyatt, we all love Hyatt in terms of just the redemption values, but then also this idea of buying points. Well, that cost to, acquire the Hyatt points, you're not going to get that half cent each, that 1 cent each. It still comes out to like a little over 1.5 cents, give or take. And their sales there's either no sale, there's an okay sale. And again, probably like that once a year, you'll get that sale where you're like, okay, hey, this is, does the math, right? So except for anything in terms of accommodations, I have no issues transferring my Chase points over to Hyatt. I won't even hesitate. I think I've only one time actually bought Hyatt points. again, just given the cost, the rates, and that I have Chase. So just in terms of my strategy, but the easiest thing, guys, have a cent each, Hilton and IHG, especially for beginners. Guys, don't even worry about the other ones. Just Hilton is your go-to if this is something you want to give a swing at.
Yeah, and I think the timing, like you said, is important because Hilton, for the most part, they're running a bonus promotion all throughout the year. And I know one of the things that you're alluding to there is the fact that, usually their top tier bonus, unless it gets better, I'm not aware of, is 100% bonus essentially. So if you buy 100,000 Hilton points, you'll get another 100,000, so 100% bonus. So you're basically buying 200,000 for the price of 100,000, which is where that cost of a half a cent per point comes in, because technically you're paying a cent per point, but then you're getting twice the value, so it's splitting it in half. IHG, as you said, is very similar as well. And one of the things I remember, so Taryn my fiance bought the max that you can get in a calendar year of IHG points earlier this year, because for her, she had a targeted bonus of 100% for IHG, but my targeted bonus was only 85%. So for the same spend, if I had bought those points under my account, I would have gotten much less of total value out of the same purchase price than she received. So I think these are the things that's important to note, that if you're looking right now and you're like, oh, I want to go buy Hilton points. If you're seeing for whatever reason, Hilton's promotion right now is only 75%, it's worth it waiting to get to that 100% so that you're getting that half a cent per point of value. But Tommy, this is the easy part we just talked about, which is the purchasing of points. How do we know when it's actually worthwhile to use said points? I know it's in the most basic sense, the math is, okay, well, if I can just avoid choosing my Chase or Amex points, this resort would have been, I don't know, $5,000. And instead I'm buying points and getting it for less. But, that's ideal. But do you have more of a nuance or specific way to know, okay, I've bought these points. I just listened to the podcast. I have 100% Hilton bonus. I've got, I don't know, let's say $2,000 to buy 400,000 Hilton points. Now what do I do?
Yeah, so I would say, again, I'm going to keep harping on this. We spend our time researching. The booking of things, guys, the transferring of points, that's quick. That should be quick. That should be the last thing we do. Everything happens before we even get to that point. So let's say you got a trip in mind. We have points, maybe not enough to cover it all. So whether it's flights or hotels, let's just look at it in the scenario of, hey, I've got enough transferable points to book my business or first class flights, wherever it is. But what am I going to do for hotels? Don't have enough points for that. So again, just going back to the old internet, guys, whether you're scrolling through Hilton properties at all times or you're not, or you're new to it, Google in like, hey, what are the most aspirational Hilton properties in the world? And make a hit list. Start going through these. Start looking at the calendars and searching flexible dates and seeing, hey guys, is it the Waldorf Astoria Maldives where availability is few and far between? And I've got to plan everything around that. Or, is it somewhere like the Seychelles or even, Thailand, where there's generally pretty consistent availability with things. So it's going in and just figuring out what's possible, what can I do? And then it's kind of that when piece is almost kind of secondary. So spend some time doing a little point inspiration and reverse engineering things. And then ultimately, guys, from there, let's just say, you decide, hey, I want to go to the Hilton Seychelles La Brise, or I want to go to, the Conrad Maldives. Sure, we got some dates that we got to work with and things. So go in there and say, hey, okay, here's some windows of when these are open. Now, how do I plan my flights around these? Because again, you want to put the whole package together, especially with something like Hilton where you can buy them at any time. There's no need to. So you get to that point of, okay, hey, these are the two hotels that I like. Hey, here's a bunch of dates that work for our schedule. How can I line these flights up? Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you line up your flights and it lines up with the hotel availability. So really, you're putting all your puzzle pieces, you're getting them on the table, and you're figuring out the best way to piece them together, knowing that final piece, let's just call it the points purchase, that piece is there. We want to plug that bad boy in once all our pieces are kind of aligned. And yeah, guys, it's doing your research. Do your research, make a plan, and then execute. And you can take that same concept, not just for this trip, but for every trip. It's spend your time researching, not searching.
Hey everyone, quick break from the episode. If you're enjoying the show, make sure you're subscribed on whatever platform you're listening on so you never miss an episode. And if you've gotten any value so far, it would mean the world if you left a quick rating or review. It helps more people discover the show and keeps us motivated to keep creating great content. Also, if you're feeling stuck or want help with points and miles, whether it's picking your first card, planning a big redemption, or even having someone book it all for you, we've got you covered. There's a link in the show notes to schedule a free points and miles consultation. Just fill out a quick questionnaire, tell us your goals, and we'll take it from there. And don't forget, our newsletter and private Facebook group are great ways to stay on top of breaking news, updated card offers, and tips that don't always make it into the podcast. You'll find those links in the show notes as well. Now, back to the episode. I think understanding, again, value for what you're buying and what you're using is important, because earlier this year, I mentioned the IHG. I also bought the max Hilton points I could buy for the calendar year, which I think is 240,000 with the 100% bonus. So I got 480,000 points. A great example of use of this is that there is an SLH property in Fiji, which we're going to be doing our honeymoon in later this year, that as of right now we're planning to stay if the flights work out, that the standard room rate was 100,000 Hilton points per night. And we were able to, by having these points, be able to get the fifth night free. And so with the fifth night free, the total value, so let's just say hypothetically, I think the number is close to, for 400,000 points, I would have spent about $2,000. But the value of the 5 nights at that hotel would have been, let's call it $5,000. Right. So yes, I spent $2,000, and I know we talk about a lot of like nearly free travel. So paying $2,000 is not free by any means, but that's still more than 50% off a luxury. So SLH stands for Small Luxury Hotels of the World property in Fiji by buying points. And because I took advantage, I didn't buy 200,000 points for $2,000. I got 400,000 points for $2,000. And so to your point, Tommy, understanding, being able to research and understand where your points can have the most value. And then you have to understand both at what price point to buy the points and then at what price point to redeem the points. Because arguably, if I had spent $2,000 on points for a hotel that would have cost me $2,100, it would not have been worthwhile, in my opinion, to do all that work to save $100. There's so much more value I could have gotten out of my points. Would you agree with that?
Sure. Yeah, 100%, guys. And like I said, numbers are they're obviously important, right? That's one of the key ways to making decisions. It's going to be numerical. But when it comes to, hey, how does this apply to me to me specifically? Guys, the points, whether you're using your credit cards or whether we're talking about buying points allow us to either travel more or travel better. It allows us to do things that, hey, maybe you could pay $2,000 direct to the hotel to book this, but suddenly putting a $5,000 ticket, that's a little bit of a harder pill to swallow. I don't care how much money you make. So this idea of being able to buy the points to raise up that blocker of that decision maker of that there's always the dollar cost. And, we're travel hackers. We travel for free. Nothing's free. How can we get it as cheap as possible? How can we limit our out of pocket as much as possible while still doing exactly what we want to do? And that's where this whole kind of big picture strategy comes into play with how you just want to think about things, because nothing will ever be 100% free. But okay, well, you can spend $2,000 and go to one of the most epic hotels in Fiji, or you're like, oh, I'm too stubborn to spend money. Well, guess what? You're not going to the epic hotel in Fiji, or you're going to miss out on some other trips because you're stacking your points for something else. So yeah, that probably got some people twisted on that comment, but yeah, that's the realities.
No, Tommy, you're just segueing a little bit here. You've talked about great hotel brands to look at, right? So very specifically Hilton and IHG, these are two that we took advantage of myself this year. But when it comes to airline specifically, I know you said that you just bought some of the Aeroplan, but what are some of the other airline programs that are especially strong when it comes to buying miles? And if you have kind of an idea of why or what to look for with those airlines, that'd be helpful as well.
In terms of just breaking the two hotels' flights, just from the perspective, expert, beginner, hotels it'll just be an easier score, let's just say. There's less thinking or less research, let's just say. With the flights, there's only 4 hotel chains. Do you know how many airline programs there are? Yeah, there's only 3 alliances, but there's dozens, 30, 40, 50 airline programs out there, all with different pricing, all with different award cards, all with different partner availability. There's a lot more layers to it. And even, like I said, even the experts will say, well, finding flights is easy, but it's not that easy. we make it look easy, but it's not as easy as we make it look. So there's a lot more layers to the flight side of things. And so what I would say, in general, I've got a few programs that I would say at least once a year, I am going to purchase their miles. And I'm going to either purchase them at a speculative kind of scenario of like, hey, you know what? This is an all-time high sale. I know what my travel frequencies are. I know that I've got a use at some point, over the next 6 to 12 months. There's a few scenarios, but I'll start off with kind of my mains. Probably my number one guys with airline miles is probably going to be Air Canada. And when I say, my number one program, I'm also not only thinking about the acquisition cost of these points, that's a key part of this, but what can I do with these miles? With Air Canada, not only is it Star Alliance, but they've got so many, other kind of unique partnerships to where, hey, yeah, the acquisition price is great when you get that 100% sale, but with what it allows me to potentially do, it gives me the most reach, very, very little taxes, fees, fuel surcharges, and stuff like that, because you got to factor that into it as well. And so, yeah, I probably spend $5,000 a year on Air Canada miles. Probably one bigger purchase when that's all time, and then there might be some one or two little flights where it lines up with that real time availability. So they've changed it a little bit. I want to say 1.3, 1.4 cents. But again, guys, anything under 1.5 is going to be overall good value if you know what you're doing.
Before we move on to besides Aeroplan, if you had to ballpark, and I know this is just going to be a random kind of estimation, for the $5,000 you spend in Aeroplan miles, how much value would you guess you actually get from Aeroplan flights?
Let's see. You don't want to see my spreadsheet. It is ridiculous. So let's just see here. Let's give you a breakdown. So January 10th, I purchased 180,000 miles for $2,196. Got 1.2 cents per point. For flights, and this is a pretty consistent number, I'm averaging 10.7 cents per point on all my flight redemptions, and I've got 30 on the year so far. So my acquisition cost was 1.2 cents. For my math people out there, I turned that into 10.7 cents and maintained all my transferable points. So now, is everyone going to get that? No. But even getting a simple 4 cents or 5 cents per point out of your redemptions, you're basically booking this flight at, let's call it 20% of the cost. So yeah, I guess that's kind of the math behind it. Spent 2,100 and I turned it into about 18 grand.
I was going to say, yes, if you're spending about $5,000 a year in Aeroplan alone and you're averaging 10 cents per point, then that means you're getting $50,000 of flight and ticket value for $5,000. So, and I wanted to be clear to kind of extrapolate that number because someone could very easily, because people of all budgets listen to this podcast, right? So someone could very easily hear, like, I'm trying to not spend money to buy flights in general. Why would I spend $5,000? But then when you clarify that $5,000 is getting you $50,000 of value, yes, is it as great as having a $800 credit card or $700 credit card fee that gets you that same amount of points? No. But if you can still save those points for other things and extrapolate the value out of them, that's now saving you from having to go into this rat race of sign up bonuses and other things. And as you said, you had your spend maximized before and as efficient as possible, but you still got to use those points at some point.
Yeah. Well, dude, like I said, you take it to that next layer and okay, yeah, I got those 180,000 Air Canada miles, spent $5,000, turned it into 50. Well, don't forget about the 180,000 Amex Chase or Capital One miles that I now still have, which you slap another 10 cents per point on there. Suddenly $2,000 turns into 70.
Absolutely.
So again, but that's, yes, what's right in front of me, but the long term and the opportunity cost of every decision. If I do this, does that open this door? Does this close this door? And again, playing the long term and getting rid of that. I don't want to pay out of pocket for anything because I don't care who it is. Travel hacking is nothing is totally free. So how do we just make it cheap as possible?
Absolutely. And I want to go back because I know you're going to mention a couple other airlines, but I want to say a thought before I forget, which is that as someone's listening to this and they're thinking, okay, this sounds great. I want to go. I'm going to buy points because someone could be catching this episode in November, right? Or whatever it may be. Keep in mind that for most hotels, if not all of them, and most airlines, again, if not all of them, they have a limit of how much you can buy each calendar year per person, right? So, for instance, Taryn's maxed out for IHG for this calendar year for herself. I've maxed out for Hilton. Now, she could buy Hilton points. I could buy IHG points. But keep that in mind as you're thinking through this strategy. This isn't something that necessarily you can say, oh, okay, $5,000, I can get 50,000 of value. At any point, I'm just going to buy all of these points that I need at any given moment, because you could cap out each year, which is why it sounds like it makes sense when you see some of these better sales and you know your flight and your travel history and your travel patterns, that it's okay for you to max out in 2024 purchase, that you may not use those points till 2025 because you've secured the most you can get in 2024. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, definitely. And I would say, kind of go back to the hotels or the airlines. Because if you think about like the Hilton scenario, you can max out, it's 240,000 points a year, which equates to 480,000. If you think of it like this, guys, you could buy Hilton points once a year and redeem that for any of their most aspirational properties in the world. So if you say, hey, every single year I'm going to spend $2,000 and I've got a week at one of the most epic Hiltons you could possibly book. If you just think of it like kind of on that trip basis, so once a year, you full send some Hilton points and yeah, max it out. I have literally maxed out Hilton every single year, probably for 10, 11 years now straight. I mean, it's a no brainer. I'm purchasing my 240 or my 480,000 in Seychelles. I've been to Bora Bora, 4 times. But again, I've got some intended use for it because it's always on sale. When that opportunity comes up, it's a no brainer. Scoop and score, get the points, book the hotel. See you next year.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I got to come back though, because I know I cut you off when we were talking about airlines. You said some great stuff about Aeroplan and the other airline programs that we should be focusing on when it comes to buying miles.
Yeah. And I would say, again, there's kind of those two pieces. It's not only just the acquisition price. It's okay, well, what's the outcome? What's the result? Or what can I do with these? And so I would say another couple that, I would say Air Canada is probably, it's kind of the top in its own. Some secondary ones, I'm going to do Avianca Life Miles and Air France Flying Blue. Avianca, specifically because that acquisition price, it can be amongst like the lowest of the low, and they will have big swings like in their sales and stuff like that. But I've seen Avianca Life Miles, 1.2 cents each. Now, is their availability always the best with partners? Probably not. Does their customer service suck? Yeah, it does. But that price it's attractive. And so, yeah, I like the Life Miles. And then even with that recent deval that they've had, guys, it's still a great price point. And then I do that Life Miles Plus subscription or whatever. It's like $50 a month. It waives any change or modification fees. I get like 2,000 miles a month, but that's a whole nother kind of subject. But Avianca Life Miles, you get 2 or 3 like really solid sales. But again, that availability, I mean, you got wide open Star Alliance, but still what you might see on United or Air Canada may or may not see on Avianca. So that's always kind of like if I'm going to buy Avianca, I'm going to be seeing, hey, is this flight I'm looking at or need like isn't even there? Because it might not be. And you're like, oh crap, I just bought points and this flight I thought would be there is not going to be there. Because that's one thing you don't want either, depending on, where your strategy's at. And then, with Air France, even their good sale prices, they're going to be a little bit higher. You might see it right around, I'm trying to think if I bought Flying Blue this year. Okay, so I bought Flying Blue back in April, and I actually did pay 1.7 cents per point, but it was a perfect one of those scenarios where I had a need. It was an Etihad flight coming back. It was like 82,000 Flying Blue miles, but either way, I spent a little bit more than what I normally would, but it lined up. And the guys, in terms of like the Flying Blue program, in terms of the, whether it's the promos or being able to fly business class to Europe for, 50, 60,000 points, kind of going back to the idea of what's my cash out of pocket. Okay, well, your acquisition price might be 1.7 cents each, but at the end of the day, if it's only 50,000 miles to fly biz class, you're still looking at, $700-800 out of pocket for a business class seat. So you got to look at the numbers on both sides of acquisition costs, but then what's the redemption cost in terms of how many points? And like I said, if I can get a business class international for under $1,000 out of pocket, that's a home run in any scenario. But yeah, recap top 3, Aeroplan. Secondary will be Flying Blue and Avianca, at least in terms of what I scoop up the most.
I love that. And it works out coincidentally for me because I have about 230,000 points stuck at Aeroplan due to not even buying points. It's just stuck at Aeroplan that I've got to figure out how to use. So I love that they're one of the better places, which I knew, so I didn't feel as bad. But I love that you have reaffirmed that that's one of the better places to just have points sitting out there, which is great. Tommy, this has been fantastic. I want us to start wrapping up a little bit, but a couple questions I have for you still. So are there any programs that you know of where buying points can trigger some extra perks? So like credit card bonus categories or portal rewards, any ways that you can kind of stack the expense of that purchase, or I should say use that purchase to stack greater rewards? Because obviously we're talking about spending $2,000-$3,000, whatever it may be. That's a big purchase for some people. That's an entire sign up bonus on a card at some times. So any stacking or kind of additional benefits that you're aware of that's possible?
So yes and no. So essentially, guys, now, there might be one, I think even I could just change, but essentially, guys, all these points purchases, they're no longer direct with the airline. They're no longer direct with the hotel. Almost all these points purchases are running through like points.com. No big deal, it doesn't impact us, but it impacts us in the sense of we're not getting any category bonuses from that. You're not going to get 5x airline miles. You're not going to get 10x Marriott or Hyatt. You're at best, you're going to be looking at a 2x on a Capital One, venture, or, 1.5 on a Freedom Unlimited. So that points earnings, it is what it is. But either way, you're spending money, you're still going to get something back. Now, really, there's, I guess, two main ways to stack or strategize on this. So especially if we go back to our Hilton people and then hotel status in general, the best way to stack value, stack your points with some elite status. You can get top tier elite status just by holding a card. And DeAndre, your $5,000 stay in Fiji at the SLH, well, when Mr. Diamond DeAndre shows up, we've been expecting you. We've upgraded you. Suddenly you're in a $10,000 a night room or $10,000 stay. Now you've just doubled the value of your points there. So in terms of like stacking just hotel points in general, whether you buy them or not, status. The Hilton Aspire card gives you diamond status just by holding the card. Marriott Amex Brilliant gives you platinum just by holding the card. So what I tell a lot of my clients that I'll do trips for, the no-brainer move is, again, I tend to do a lot of those. I might have points for flights. We might have this, but like, hey, what's the best play for hotels? The best play is, okay, hey, we're going to do a Hilton. As soon as we line things up or whatever, you're going to get a Hilton Aspire card. You're going to buy 240,000 points on your Hilton Aspire card. You're going to get 80% of the way to the sign-up bonus, which is going to be 150, 175, and you've got a free night. So now we've hit a sign-up bonus. We've earned top-tier elite status that once we stay, it's going to further double the value. And yeah, so in terms of like a stack, build your trip around a Hilton, get the Hilton Aspire card, max out your points purchase. Now you got 600,000 freaking Hilton points, diamond status, and you're cooking. That's the no-brainer move.
Got it. I love that. I love how you kind of put all of those things together as well. Now, Tommy, there's a lot of, just like in the world of credit cards themselves, right? There's a lot of great, but then there's a lot of kind of red flags, negatives, things like that. In the points buying world, I know that there are some third-party sites. There are points brokers that sell, they offer to sell points and miles. What are your takes on those? And then are there any red flags that people should watch out for before buying points in general?
If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And again, I said it probably 3 or 4 times, long-term. You want to do some manufactured spending to earn some more points? Well, guess what? Want to lose your Amex for the rest of your life? You want to lose Chase? You got to keep yourself in position to always be in position. So do not buy from third-party brokers. Do not do anything that sounds too good to be true. Play by the black and white so that you're always in the game, because the game's not as fun when you're watching from the sidelines. So again, anything we're doing, as the rules are black and white, don't do the points brokers, buy it direct. Now, obviously, I can buy points for myself and book someone else's travel. That's kind of a little gray line area, but hey, I'm not buying through a third party. I'm not doing this. It's, hey, I'm purchasing points or I'm using my credit cards. You can use your points for anybody. But at the end of the day, doing that transactional thing on the backside, don't do it. Keep it direct. And again, keep yourself in play at all times.
That's great, Tommy. One last thing I want to wrap up with here. Now, I know the majority of our audience is US based. I think it's north of 80% of our listeners are US based, but I see the numbers. I see all the countries that come in of all the listeners that we have, which is fantastic. There's a lot of people that do listen to this podcast that are not in the US. Can you just sum up why this strategy actually works for people out of the country, international travelers, why this could be super attractive to them versus, the all of us that are here in the country?
Very glad you hit on that, because at the end of the day, this is 10 times more valuable if you don't live in the States, because good old USA, we are in the, this is points, wonderland over here. We got the capabilities to earn 2, 3, 4, 5, even 10x points per dollar on our credit cards. Oh my God. Canada, some places you might be able to get a little, maybe 2x here or there. As no other country in the world has credit cards that has the points earnings potential that we have. Spend $100,000 in the States, if you're optimized, you should be able to rip 300,000-400,000 a year from points. You're in the UK, you're in Australia, you're hoping to get 1.25 each. So 100K in spend, you got 100,000 points. You got to spend a lot of freaking money to, for it to really accumulate to anything. Now, should you still be playing the game? Yes. But when it comes to redeeming the points, guys, it doesn't matter where you are. These airline programs, these hotel programs are the same. So this whole concept of, what's the cost, but essentially to be able to purchase these points at these fixed costs, at these standard rates, unless you have a business, unless you're spending millions of dollars a year, which, not that many of us are, to be out of the country and to be able to basically say, get this business class or first class of these epic redemptions at the price of a Spirit flight or staying at the Hampton Inn. This is insanely valuable if you live out of the country. And quite frankly, if you are out of the country, guys, this is arguably like one of the only ways to really do this, unless you build a business, you start an e-com store, you start ripping, a couple million points a year. This is the promised land to be able to level up that travel or get more travel. And that same mindset and how to think about it absolutely applies. So yeah, if you guys are outside of the US, sorry, your credit cards aren't as good as ours, but I can't do anything about that. No excuses, guys. You can still go play the game. You can fly first class for economy. You can stay at the Waldorf for the price of the Hampton if you do some homework and learn about the buying of the points.
Tommy, this has been fantastic. I know you have a full business catered around travel, especially in the points world. Would love for you to share about what you do, your services, as well as where people can follow you.
Yeah, guys. Listen, I've been doing this. I've been helping people with their points, credit, and financial game for about 4.5 years now. Got a couple different programs, but we've consulted thousands of business owners and entrepreneurs, and not just the US, Canada, UK, Australia, all over the place. With kind of our theme is, guys, it's, I got a couple ones. We help you spend smarter so you can travel better. We help you build experiential wealth without sacrificing financial health by leveraging and being smart with our money and turning it into things that have you can't put a price on creating memories and doing it with your loved ones. And that's a big thing that what we do. So whether you're a business owner, whether you're a 9-to-5er, I help people do awesome stuff. I was going to say bad word there, but unlock epic travel experiences that you might not have had otherwise. And yeah, like I said, I've probably redeemed over 500 million miles for clients. I've done thousands of trips. So, and again, whether you're a 9-to-5er or an 8 or 9-figure entrepreneur, we take the game and cater it to you. So, but yeah, you guys can hit me at Travel Like Tommy. One of these days, I'll start going on other platforms, but you know what? That's where you can find me and keep up with the travels. And yeah, guys, like I said, you get to see this, put on a good show. So check me out.
And that's on Instagram, correct?
On IG, yep.
Perfect. Tommy, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thanks for coming on the show today. A couple last questions before we wrap up. Who else should we have on the show? I know we both are surrounded by some great people in the points and miles space, so I'd love to know, who else do you think we should have on the show for a future episode?
Yeah, I think you guys had a pretty good run in there. I would say, at the end of the day, anytime we can cater to our audience, just like you were kind of saying, hey, we've got a lot of international people, maybe kind of doing some more niche things where like, hey, I kind of maybe cater a little more towards business owners. And maybe it's like, hey, maybe it's your recent college grads, just starting their job that want to travel. It's like, hey, where's that? Who can speak on this to a relatable for this kind of market? So like one of the kids that I kind of mentored and works for me, Victor, Travel Like Vic, awesome dude. He's 24, 25, taught him everything I know. And also, but he can cater that over to his audience. So he's great. You should absolutely go hit up Eli as well. He will speak, more on, entrepreneurial, business minded type thing. And then my other team member, Allison, it's used to be Lucky Tic Tac points to boarding pass. As I will confidently, but very humbly, say that I am good at this stuff, specifically with flights. Allison's in her own She is absolutely over the top, next level. And anything you could see online and in the internet, she's got this in her head. She doesn't have to think.
We actually had her on the show last year.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, we did. It was a great episode. She knows seats.arrow like it's built into her brain.
That exactly. She's like an AI bot. She's programmed.
Right. Well, perfect, Tommy. Any last thoughts before we wrap this one up?
Guys, I think that's just my two main touch points again is don't spend your time searching. Spend your time doing your research. Have a plan and execute it and think about how does this action impact future actions. We're not here to take a trip. We're here to take a trip and a trip and a trip and a trip. So everyone think long term. Don't chase sign up bonuses just because they're gone. Build a foundation, play the game, and continuously play it. That's my parting message.
Awesome, Tommy. Thanks for bringing a lot of knowledge. I think this deep dive into the world of buying points, hopefully I think the listeners would have found a lot of value. And as I did the first time I heard you talk about it, and actually caused me to take action, understand that buying points can fit very, very well into your overall points and mile strategy. And as you said, specifically also helping to preserve your transferable points to be used in other places and other ways. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Batman, thanks for having me. See you guys.
Absolutely. For the listeners out there, if you enjoyed listening to Tommy and hearing more stories like that, continue to follow, subscribe to the podcast. Please, we always love it when you leave a rating, a review, tell your friends, provide some feedback, and do all the things. Follow us on all the social media channels, and we will catch you on the next episode. Take care, everybody.